Of course, here is a long, emotionally engaging story based on a title related to kindness. Title: The Keeper of Lost Things. Powerful hook. The eviction notice wasn't a piece of paper. It was a shard of ice lodged directly in Alara's heart, and as she stood frozen on the crumbling porch of her tiny apartment, the winter wind didn't just whip at her threadbare coat, it seemed to scream her failures right back at her, telling her that a single mother's love, no matter how fierce, simply wasn't enough to keep a roof over her son's head. The notice trembled in Alara's hand, the official city seal a bloody smear under the dim porch light. 30 days. They had 30 days before the bank owned every memory made within those walls. Leo's first steps in the living room, the tiny height chart penciled on the kitchen doorframe, the whispered story in the closet during thunderstorms. Now, it would all be reduced to a line on a foreclosure report. She stuffed the paper deep into her pocket, took a shuddering breath that burned her lungs, and painted on a smile before opening the door. 6-year-old Leo was at the small formica table, meticulously coloring a dinosaur with a broken green crayon. "Look, Mama, it's a brontosaurus. He eats leaves from the very tallest trees," he announced, his world still blissfully contained within the lines of his coloring book. "He's wonderful, sweetheart," Alara said, her voice tight. She busied herself by the nearly empty fridge, the hum of its motor a lonely sound in the apartment. Milk, half a stick of butter, a few slices of cheese. The calculus of desperation began in her mind. How many meals could she stretch this into? Which bill could she delay this month? The eviction notice in her pocket felt like a lead weight. The next week was a blur of frantic job applications, rejected even for waitressing positions she was overqualified for. Overqualified was just a polite word for a risk. They saw a desperate woman with a child and thought of missed shifts and daycare emergencies. Each rejection was a nail in the coffin of her hope. It was on one of these soul-crushing walks home, the cold seeping through the thin soles of her shoes, that she passed Mr. Abernathy's cart. He was a permanent fixture on the corner of Maple and Fifth, a silent, stooped man of indeterminate age who sold fruit from a wooden cart. His face was a roadmap of deep lines, and he rarely spoke, his eyes hidden under the brim of a worn flat cap. People hurried past him, barely glancing at his polished apples and vibrant oranges. He was part of the urban scenery, invisible. Alara never bought anything. Her budget didn't allow for luxuries like fresh fruit. But today, as she passed, her eyes red, rimmed from silent tears shed in a public bathroom stall, her empty stomach clenched. A single, perfect orange, bright as a miniature sun, sat separate from the rest on the cart's edge. She walked past as always, but then she stopped. Leo, he'd loved the orange slices she'd once been able to give him. The simple, healthy joy of it felt like a memory from another lifetime. She couldn't afford it. She knew she couldn't. But the desire to give her son one small, perfect thing, a taste of sunshine in their gray world, overwhelmed her. She turned back, her cheeks burning with a shame she couldn't name. She approached the cart, her hand shaking as she pointed to the orange. How much for just this one?" she whispered, already digging in her purse for the few coins she had. Mr. Abernathy looked at her, not through her, but at her. His eyes, a surprising light blue, seemed to see everything. The eviction notice burning a hole in her coat, the hunger in her eyes, the weight of her despair. He held her gaze for a long moment, then slowly reached out, but he didn't take the coins she offered. Instead, his gnarled, work-roughened hand closed around the orange. He picked it up, polished it gently on his sleeve, and held it out to her. "For the boy," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, like stones turning in a tide. No charge. Tears, hot and sudden, sprang to Alara's eyes. This small act of unexpected grace was a crack in the dam of her composure. She wanted to protest, to insist on paying, but the words wouldn't come. She just nodded, a choked sob escaping her as her fingers closed around the cool, dimpled skin of the fruit. "Thank you," she managed to breathe out. "Thank you so much." He simply gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod and turned to arrange his apples, giving her the privacy to collect herself. That night, Elara presented the orange to Leo as if it were a golden treasure. His gasp of delight was the most beautiful sound she'd heard in months. They shared it, segment by segment, the burst of sweet, tangy juice a balm on their frayed spirits. For a few minutes, the fear and the cold were kept at bay. The next day, despite her own overwhelming circumstances, Elara felt a pull. She couldn't repay Mr. Abernathy in money, but she could in kindness. On her way home, she stopped and, with a nervous smile, handed him one of the 2 thermoses she carried. "It's just tea," she said quickly. "I thought you might be cold." He looked at the thermos, then at her. The slightest softening around his eyes, he accepted it with a nod. It became a ritual. She would bring him tea or a portion of the simple soup she'd made for dinner. She never stayed to chat, too shy and too burdened by her own problems. But a silent connection was forged on that street corner, a tiny thread of mutual, unspoken understanding between 2 people who knew what it was to be overlooked by the world. The days bled into weeks. The eviction date loomed, a dark cloud on Elara's horizon. Her job search remained hopeless. The small exchanges with Mr. Abernathy were the only flickers of light in the deepening gloom. One afternoon she found him coughing, a deep, rattling sound that shook his thin frame. The winter cold was settling into his bones. Without a second thought, Elara's nursing instincts, dormant since Leo was born, kicked in. "You shouldn't be out in this cold," she said, her voice firm now with concern, not shyness. He waved a dismissive hand. "The cart needs minding. It needs a healthy minder," she insisted. The next day, she brought him home, made ginger honey syrup for his cough, and one of Leo's old, thick woolen scarves. "Please," she said, her tone brooking no argument, "wear it." He looked at the scarf, then wrapped it slowly around his neck. The gratitude in his eyes was profound. That afternoon, as she was leaving, he spoke, his voice clearer than she'd ever heard it. "You are a good woman, a kind mother. The boy is lucky." His words struck her to her core. Nobody had called her lucky in a very long time. It was a gift far greater than the orange. The following week, the inevitable happened. Elara answered a knock on the door to find a stern-faced man with a clipboard. He was there to do a preliminary inspection of the property before the bank took possession. This was it, the beginning of the end. As he walked through, making notes, Elara's world shrank to a pinprick of despair. Where would they go? A shelter, her car. After the man left, she collapsed at the kitchen table, head in her hands, finally allowing the sobs to rack her body. She was still there an hour later when another knock came. Wiping her tears, she expected it to be the man again. Instead, she opened the door to Mr. Abernathy. He had never come to her home. He stood on her porch, looking out of place and strangely solemn. In his hand was not fruit, but a small, weathered wooden box. "May I come in?" he asked. Bewildered, Elara nodded. He stepped inside, his eyes taking in the packed boxes, the palpable air of loss. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply held out the box. "My wife," he said, his voice soft. "She passed 10 winters ago. Cancer. We had no children. This was hers. She was a seamstress, the finest in the city." He opened the box. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, was a collection of exquisite antique thimbles, spools of gold thread, and delicate, pearl-handled sewing scissors. But nestled among them was a small, folded stack of $100 bills and a bank deposit book with a startling balance. Elara stared, uncomprehending. I don't understand. I have listened to you," he said gently. "I hear you talk to your boy about your dreams. You were a nurse. You want to help people. This," he gestured to the box, "is not doing anyone any good sitting under my bed. My Martha would have liked you. She would have said you have a fighter's spirit." Tears streamed down Ilara's face. "I can't take this. It's your life savings. It is a down payment," he interrupted firmly. "A down payment on your future. Pay off this house, go back to school, be the nurse you are meant to be. This is not a gift without strings," he added, a faint glimmer in his eye. "The string is that you and that boy of yours will come have Sunday dinner with an old man. I get lonely at that big empty house." It was more than money. It was a lifeline. It was a future. It was a belief in her when she had stopped believing in herself. 5 years later, the tiny house on Elm Street was not just saved. It was a home, filled with light and the sound of Leo's laughter. Ilara R. BSN worked at the city hospital, her gentle compassion making her a favorite among her patients. And every single Sunday, without fail, she and Leo, now a lively 11-year-old, had dinner with Arthur Abernathy. On one such Sunday, as they walked through the park, they passed a young couple sitting on a bench, their postures slumped in a familiar posture of defeat. Leo, without a word, broke away from them. He walked over to the couple and held out the brand new soccer ball he'd gotten for his birthday. The man looked up, surprised. "Here," Leo said, his voice bright and clear. "You look like you could use a game. My mom says sometimes a little fun is the best medicine." The man stared, then a slow, genuine smile broke through his worry. He took the ball. As Leo ran back, beaming, Ilara's heart swelled with a love so fierce it stole her breath. She looked at Arthur and saw her own tears reflected in his wise blue eyes. That single orange, given from a place of pure kindness, had not just saved them. It had planted a seed in her son that had grown into a forest of compassion. The keeper of lost things had not just found a family, he had helped create a legacy of love that would continue to ripple outward, changing the world one small, unexpected act at a time. Inspiring message: never underestimate the seismic power of a single act of kindness. It can be a lifeline to a drowning soul, a spark that ignites a future, and a seed that grows into a forest of compassion, sheltering generations to come. Our greatest legacy is not what we keep for ourselves, but what we choose to give away: our empathy, our love, and our belief in one another. Moral of the story: kindness is a currency that, when spent generously, yields a priceless return of hope, connection, and transformed lives.